is to speak a little bit more slowly so that interpreters get a chance. You can already see us. My name is Małgorzata Bonikowska. Think Tank. This is the place where I work, but also I'm within the Center for International Studies. It is my pleasure to welcome you here to this debate. This debate will revolve around the notion somewhat foreign to what we do at Think Tank, but that's just the appearance. As it is 15 years ago, as we thought to ourselves, food and water may be even more important than fossil fuels. And now here we are, speaking about food, agriculture, the whole industry around it, both in Poland and in the European Union, and how the situation in Ukraine has affected this industry. What are the prospects for food security and CAP? And what can we expect from the events to come, as war is far from over? We are going to hear many perspectives. There's one international guest, so let's start with Pietro Paganini.
Join us. Buongiorno, buongiorno. Pietro przyjeżdża do nas z Włoch.
Pietro is our guest from Italy. He heads the think tank, which is called Competere.eu.
I jest jednocześnie
And at the same time, he's here in the capacity of the professor of the Temple University in Philadelphia. He deals with agriculture. It's in Philadelphia.
Hope you have translation and
it works well.
It works well. Thank you. I proszę Państwa, po naszej stronie
Other guest, Andrzej Gantner. We're glad to have you here. Andrzej has been our friend for years. He comments on agriculture, food, Director General of the Polish Federation of Food Producers. And it's not our first encounter, by the way. Furthermore, Julian Pawlak, please come over. Julian Pawlak is the president of the board of the National Juice Producers Association. There is also Jerzy Plewa with us. Many thanks for accepting our invitation. Jerzy Plewa is now member of Team Europe, himself also an expert at Team Europe as myself. Team Europe is a group of people, specialists in European affairs, EU affairs. Jerzy Plewa has been our negotiator in the area of agriculture during our accession talks by 2003, beginning with 1998. Later, he served in the European Commission. It is by yesterday that he had been our top official, as he was Director General of DG AGRI, so you must know everything concerning the CAP. Fair enough. So I do encourage you to ask questions. Let's have this informal exchange of ideas and opinions. Let me begin with a somewhat obvious question, addressing it to Andrzej Gantner. We have all gone very emotional about what is going on, or what has been going on recently. So could you provide us with a sort of wrap-up on how the war in Ukraine has been affecting Poland and Europe in terms of food production? And let's have a take on it, bearing in mind there is a crisis in the global south. Countries from this region are raising their concerns when it comes to Russia is doing in terms of blocking the export through Ukraine. Russia, as well as Ukraine, are the most important exporters of food produce. As for this impact, well, it is hard to take a stance in this limited time that I have, as there are many dimensions. In a nutshell, from hysteria to first we were from hysteria to hysteria. First we dreaded we would be experiencing shortages, and now apparently there is surplus of everything. It doesn't speak too good when it comes to how we manage this situation, how we tackle it. Of course, there is famine in the world, and the zone of famine has been enlarging. In the recent years, it has been even greater. And indeed, the world badly wants cereals from Ukraine. What has been the response of the EU to it? The EU wanted to boost the transfer by rail, by road, and then by the sea at the last section. It was actually something wise, but it was somewhat imposed by the situation, by the external circumstances. Bear in mind the situation in the Black Sea ports. Yes, there were negotiations with Russia, but the situation, this dreadful situation, may repeat. Yes, it may repeat. Russia did consent, as it was forced to. It is the biggest exporter of cereals in the globe, so they needed to unblock it and came to senses. It would be wise to export cereals. Look at what happened with prices. Prices started going down. Most of cereals departed from the harbors in the Black Sea, 20 million tons that left the ports in the Black Sea. We were the agents, the operators of this transfer. I'm speaking about Poland. We absorbed 3 million tons ourselves, and apparently no one needs these grains. We have our own grains, as we are a significant producer as well as exporter of grains. And now it turns out that the situation is as follows. 70% of these grains have stayed home, got stuck here in Poland. Some stuck in the silos. Another part has been managed in one way or another. But now it has destabilized our grain economy. But it's not only limited to grain. This is something that also encompasses poultry meat. So apparently we need to be wise in how we want to approach the aid to Ukraine. And at the same time, we need to be mindful of the fact this was precisely Putin's intent. He wanted to destabilize the situation around the grains. Yes, food has become a weapon. This weaponry may act on different levels. On the one hand, it has hit a very vulnerable group, that is, the group of farmers. It may lead to problems, especially in our neighboring countries, in Ukraine's neighbors. But there are also problems within the European Union, and there needs to be someone to tackle this situation. A question to Mr. Pawlak. We are here, the representative of the Federation of Juice Producers. So what's your take on it? Your perspective must be slightly different. We all like juice. We drink them very, very frequently. So how you look at it? So my observations are somewhat similar to what other industries already see. There is a lot. There are many concerns. Prices are decisive of what is going on the market. Our market, by the way, is pretty important. For the export of Poland, we need to export 75% of what we produce here in this sector. This is true for fruit as well as vegetables, and we are speaking about various levels of processing. Processed, semi-processed, or products which are least processed, and the latter group is most problematic for us. The very basic product that we operate on towards international markets is densified apple juice. It is commonplace. Poland is apple stronghold, as we manufacture as 4,200,000 tons per annum. That's something that is equivalent to the overall production of the United States or Turkey. We have only been surpassed by China. 38% of all apple production in Europe takes place in Poland. Therefore, we need to export what we produce. It is around 80% of apples processed into intensified oil apple juice is something that we have to export. So what's the issue? The war is taking place not here at home, but abroad. Notwithstanding, we export 90% of what we produce, of the amount of 400,000 tons. And now we are getting 50,000 tons of concentrate, mainly from Ukraine, after the market has been opened. And that's the crux of the matter. We are a huge exporter. Regardless, we need to additionally embrace a significant amount of production from other markets and other countries. So this is not only about concentrate from Ukraine, there is also concentrate coming from other countries. So I'm just referring to this most massive product, just to speak about the whole situation. And importantly, price matters as it determines our export directions. Competition is fierce. We've got such competitors as China, for instance, as they can sell even more on international markets than we do. And there is Ukraine, there is Moldova, and Turkey on top of that. It has historically been hard for us. It's going to be even harder these days, as there was some turbulence in trade between China and the United States. Now the United States have become our novel export market, so this is yet another direction that we have started managing. But there are other problems already brimming. There are soft fruit producers who alarm. There is fruit in storage facilities that cannot be sold. Strawberries, raspberries, other berries. And these producers are going to have talks with the Ministry of Agriculture as perspectives are grim for the upcoming season. So let's look ahead in a second, but let us have a closer look at the situation in Italy. Pietro, a question to you now. At your think tank, you study the situation of agriculture in Italy, and you also look more broadly at the European Union. How is the situation in Europe affecting your situation in Italy?
Thank you. I will speak in English, obviously. My Polish is very, very basic. Thank you for having me here, first of all. We tend to follow everything that happens around the world and in Europe, particularly not just specifically into Italy. Then, since we are based and born in Italy, we obviously look at what happens in Italy, and as you understand, it's messy by default. So everything that happens in Italy is a mess to start. But
we are used to
therefore,
it,
we should just be focusing it. So when I come to Poland and I hear that you have problems in Poland, I'm like, okay, I cannot take care of the Polish problems. But we are very interested in the Polish perspective as well as for many other countries, because obviously we have experienced, and we will experience for a long time, unfortunately, three main factors, and these are global factors. One is what we can define as the COVID or post-COVID. But as I said several times, the post-COVID is just an occasion for something that would have happened anyway in other ways. And it comes to the supply chains and to the global supply chains, and the fact that today global supply chains tend to have failures. and bottlenecks. And this is because of COVID, but it can be because of many other things. You saw a little strike in England, it was blocking the entire England and the export of England to other countries. The same for semiconductor in Taiwan or semiconductor in, or cars and semiconductors in Korea. A stop there will create troubles along the entire supply chain with an increase in prices. And obviously, if you go and try to buy a car today, it takes 6 months, 1 year to get the car because of this. The second problem is, of course, and unfortunately you experience this very close, is the war between Russia or the war of Russia in Ukraine. This is having horrible consequences, not just for Ukraine, but for the entire world, as you mentioned, for food security and stability, particularly around the world, and particularly in Russia. In Africa, and Russia knows that, and they're great chess players, and they play chess all around the world, not just in Ukraine.
I just add to that the narrative of Russia is that, of course, it's our fault of the West that there is this food crisis, because we, started the war, we started to push Russia. Russia is not guilty, while we know that Russia blocked the Ukrainian export of food.
Well, now, if you don't take me as a Putin supporter, because I'm not here, but I say in a way he's right, or Putin is right when he says it's the fault of the Western, because we haven't done enough to create, and here it comes with my third point, and then with the solution, that is climate change and the speed of climate change. And this is something that will go much beyond and much further than the Russian war and then the supply chain shortage. Why? Because climate change and climate will be here forever, luckily. And this is impacting, if we think about global drought. The fact is not raining. Just in Italy, we got a minus 35% last year of production in olive oil. And this is a big number for a country that is not self-sufficient in olive oil and is also exporting good quality olive oil. So in a way, what is the problem is that we were not able in the past years, and here is where Russia is right, we were not able to understand what was about to happen, and the fact that we needed to design and build resilient supply chains, and particularly for food, because we thought and we took for granted that food is forever, and food is always there. And we were not able to do so. In Italy, we asked the government to do an energy plan, but we also said the energy plan should be a food plan. We need a strategic plan to ensure food here in Italy, as well as in Europe, and particularly in the north of Mediterranean. Today, Italy is very much concerned about migration. Migration is very much related to food security. So our, let's say, weakness in the past, particularly at the national level, I'm less concerned about the European level, is that we were not able to create resilience. We were very much focused on sustainability. That became, and I say there was a reason behind the fact that we wanted to be more sustainable, nature positive, protect biodiversity and so on. So we invested a lot in that, and the parliament spent a lot of money and resources and time in that. But we forgot that at the same time, the sustainability should come together with resiliency. And resiliency means being able to build supply chains where if something goes wrong, we're able to move the supply chain somewhere else. I want to just give you an example that is obviously something not really much related with Europe. But for many years, Europe has boycotted palm oil, for instance, saying it's bad for health, it's bad for the environment. And many Italian companies have turned, for marketing purposes, to sunflower, and sunflower not Italian one. Farmers said, oh, Italian sunflower. No, sunflowers from Ukraine. So with the war in Ukraine, the purchase of sunflower went down. And so this company were forced to go back to
because Ukraine is one of the leading sunflower
yeah,
producer.
Absolutely. Now sunflower is back again at the convenient, still a high price, but it's available. But for many months, companies, particularly small companies, that have followed the commercial flavor of saying, we go away from palm oil, we follow the market trend, and then they were forced to go back to palm oil. So as a consumer, we were confused. So if earlier you said palm oil is bad, now you're going back to palm oil. So the reality is these small companies And I know in Poland there are a lot of small companies. In a way, they were not helped in making strategic decisions. And they don't have the strength to make strategic decisions. They are not a big multinational. They don't have the resources to understand what's happening at the geopolitical level. So I think one of the efforts that we should make in the future is exactly to build a strategy, not just for gas and oil and renewable energies, but it's for food. We keep talking about gas and petrol, but we don't talk too often and too much about food that is our primary energy.
No właśnie, proszę Państwa, to jest to, od czego zaczęliśmy dzisiaj rozmowę, że
And this is how we started our conversation today, that food and water are even more important resources than energy and oil, because we cannot live without it, really. And in Poland, the agri sector is not really discussed. It's not really taken into account when the general security, safety, energy is discussed. And now we can see how food supply is closely linked to our security. I wanted to ask a question to Jerzy Plewa. What's the situation in the European Union? We have been talking about Poland and Italy, and I would like you to tell us more about the agri-food industry in other countries like France or Spain. So what's your European take on it? Where are we? The European Union, 27 member states. Are we really self-reliant when it comes to food supplies? And what has been the impact of the war? Thank you very much for the invitation. Before I answer the question, I need to speak back to what Mr. Paganini said. When it comes to what was said by Andrzej Gantner, it's not that easy. It wasn't just about the surplus of food. We need to remember that Russia and Belarus are the biggest producers of fertilizers in the world. And this has brought on tension in the food production sector. And then the ports were blockaded for Ukraine. And we are still in a lot of uncertainty when it comes to the operation of Black Sea harbors. And that's why those solidarity corridors has been created, and they were created for a reason. Inflation is the source of problems in the European Union. That's the major source of problems. I do not agree that that Russia was right, or that they understood the things well. I think that the European Union did not understand well the situation with fossil fuels and the perspectives for long-time cooperation with Russia. So this was a strategic mistake. Then, when it comes to the EU and its food policy, you can be critical about it. You have the right to be. But during the COVID times, EU farmers were able to supply food. So there was no shortage of food in Poland and in other countries. So we have passed this test. So the EU agriculture has passed. This could have been done better, of course. But what is happening in the agri-food sector right now, the way I see it, is connected with the lack of energy transformation. And if the policy, the energy policy, is conducted the way it is in Poland, will bear the cost. And the digital transformation and the energy transformation in Poland is not as fast as it should be. Poland, Europe has great conditions when it comes to agriculture. Unfortunately, we can see the impact of climate change. 50% of the EU land suffers droughts. And then pollinators. 50% of the European Union has problems with pollinators. So I cannot agree with the statement that focusing on green transformation is a source of long-term problems. This may create short-term problems, but if we don't do it now, we will not have competitive agriculture in the future. You already have forecasts and research by well-known think tanks that show that our yields are 20% lower because of climate change. And then we need to add that agriculture is really innovative. For example, in Israel, AI can be used for agricultural purposes. But coming back to data, there is a lot of metrics. There is a lot of data available. So there is no problem when it comes to food availability. In Poland, when the production, the national production was compared to demand, it turned out that we are really self-sufficient. So we produce 118% more than we use. And this has been analyzed for 9 out of 10 products. But I would say that Ireland, Holland, the Netherlands, Slovakia, the Czech Republic are even better placed when it comes to food availability. But in Poland, we do not have overall problems with the availability of food. FAO has published a report. The report analyzes food supplies as well as the quality of food. FAO published data on the overall cost of healthy diet, depending on the country. By country, of course, the price of healthy diet is the highest in Southern America and in Africa, but we also have problems in Europe. 3.1 billion people have problems with affording a healthy diet. I would say that the problem is much broader, and it won't be possible to solve the problem in agriculture without tackling our problems connected with water and climate change. So if we forget about our long-term challenges to concentrate on short-term problems, it will lead us nowhere. And I believe, and I'm afraid that's the tendency in Poland, to be rather short-sighted. And this needs to change, because now the EU policy, common agricultural policy, is carried out, it's implemented on the country level. Of course, we have 9 common strategic goals, for example, economic, social, agriculture and natural goals. There's a lot to be done. And then there is another thing that we can do as consumers. just limit food wastage. But what you have been talking about is quite abstract. Common agricultural policy, some goals, the European Union.
Not speaking the same language creates some problems. I 100% agree that Europe is self-sustained, or at least that was the great success during COVID, is that, we could go to the supermarket, at least I think about Italy, and we found all the sort of beautiful food. And that was an amazing demonstration that the food supply chain worked. And I wrote an article on that saying, hey, we complain about a lot of things, but at the end, during COVID, when we were all home, you go to the supermarket and you can find any sort of good food, anyone, even the sweets that maybe you can say, hey, I will not eat. My concern was with the long-term global perspective, that what Russia has done, understanding the rules of the game, was making who is living around Europe, so Mediterranean, Northern Mediterranean and Africa, more poor, or with the lack of access to food security. And that is the risk. I think Europe is self-sustained. Let's not forget that Europe still depends very much on the import of raw material and commodities from Central America, Southeast Asia. So this is a problem. I agree that we need sustainability policies, because climate change is our main challenge. It's not just our main, it's the world main challenge today. What I'm saying is that we need, and if we talk about also the front of pack labeling, is that we need to find policies that are balancing the need for sustainability, or nature positive, as you want to call it, with economic development, because otherwise we have too much sustainability, and it's a great thing, but we forget about economic development. We have problems with jobs and labor, and we will have an economic crisis that means not creating sustainability.
To już powoli przechodzimy do znajdowania rozwiązań. Momencik. Pan Andrzej najpierw.
Chciałem coś powiedzieć. Znaczy tak, to świetnie wszystko wygląda.
Now over to Andrzej. Everything looks great when you look at Fit for 55, Green Deal, beautiful strategies. But they were created in prehistoric times, because now, 4 years ago, this is like in another era. The conditions for agriculture were different. Supply chains were different. International trade was totally different. The situation in Europe was different as well. And given that so much has changed all over the world, very little has changed in the strategic approach. So I guess that we would have to think it through really well. Do we really want to reduce food production in the European Union? 25% of surface for organic agriculture looks great, but is it really what we want to do now? And then the same goes for waste disposal, waste management. Solutions that are not feasible for today, meaning that they are too costly. If companies cannot actually implement the regulation, this will mean additional costs. And Polish agriculturers, farmers say that those goals are really laudable. We all want a sustainable future, but European Union is not homogeneous when it comes to food production, food supply, food markets. That's why all those solutions should take into account impact analysis for each and every country separately. Otherwise, we will run up against a brick wall. Somebody said, yes, of course, we need to help Ukraine. Look, this looks great from the perspective of Spain, France, but it did not work out so well here, because this produce has been stuck in Poland. And now we have a problem. We need to spend 600 million euros for something. Maybe we'll manage to solve it, but it doesn't look likely. Are we going to put blockade on the border? What will be the effect on international reactions? Putin will be so happy about it. He'll have a reason to open up a bottle of champagne. We need international strategies, that's true. But they need to be adapted, adjusted. We can't be just so focused on one goal without considering the conditions, changing conditions. And there is one more thing: water. Water is of utmost importance. We have problems with water. The south of Europe has great problems with water. The quality of Polish soils is not good. Our climate is a bit better, true. And that's why this wonderful tax on water was created. Polish Waters Company was established, and the water tax was levied on everybody. And the goal was to increase retention, water retention. But this has not happened. We have all paid a lot of money as consumers, as water users, and the water retention is only at 3%. This is what is kept by beautiful Polish soil. Prices have gone up. We have a new tax, and that's the effect of this laudable strategy when implemented in practice.
So there is a gap, and that's the problem. There is a gap in between what is happening at this bureaucratic level and in the actual field. Yes, because this is very much down to the actual people. We did pass our exam during COVID times. We did. We did we? This wasn't us. It was the farmers. These was the ones at the forefront. And these were the doctors, nurses, farmers. They did pass their exam. Not a single system of the European Union did pass its exam. No, people did, as they were the ones who took over the responsibility in continuing on their duties. So there is a certain ethos of food production. This is something very often neglected. We have survived through some panic outbursts when somebody communicated there had been no sugar, and Poland rushed to stores to buy out the entire sugar storage. So we've already forgotten how food matters in terms of our sovereignty. And I am really disillusioned at seeing how different governments approached food and agriculture. And there is this Ministry of Agriculture, as well as rural development. Great, but what are other domains which are related to agriculture and rural development? Agriculture was somewhat lagging behind other areas of interest. Now we are going to discuss various policies and solutions, but before we do that, let's ask Mr. Julian Pawlak about this very gap between bureaucracy and the field. Do you see it along these lines as well? And what could we expect of the European Union, of CAP? Diagnosis has already been postulated, and I couldn't agree more. But now let me speak from the level of enterprises. We've got beautiful goals, lofty words, but, and there is this but, as enterprises are now struggling with the costs, with prices, with raw materials costs. So following suit of all the other industries. Yes, we are following suit of all the other industries. The competition has grown ever fiercer for price at markets. Customers have changed their attitude as inflation is now roaring. We already see the first signs of a recession luring away. So consumers have become very prudent in terms of doing their shopping, and this is going to be reflected on the actual condition of enterprises and businesses. This is going to have its reflections on what consumers need, and that's something that we need to be mindful of. It used to be good, and the overall economy, it's no longer as good. It's going to be slightly worse for enterprises. Especially medium-sized enterprises are going to struggle. They're going to struggle in the first place, and we already see it. Large enterprises are going to stay afloat, but still, they also have their limits. But at the same time, they've got significant market shares. They've got markets. They've got where to sell. Therefore, they can slightly mitigate these losses and manage how they approach their sales. They will do relatively good on the local markets as well as overseas markets. So large companies are going to fare relatively better than the medium-sized enterprises. And to pick up on it, agricultural businesses struggle even more as there is climate change and water-related problems. And we do encourage you to take a watch on Eva Evert's documentary movie, Till the Last Drop, that's the title. It was already screened in TVN station, 75 minutes, great documentary on what's at stake for water. And there's also an example from Italy, Pietro. By the way, one example, your river, which is now in poor state. And now I question to you, Pietro. How, what's the perception of agricultural businesses in Italy? What's your perception in Italy? Because you are being tested as well, and your think tank also studies this area. And there are different ideas given by your government, by the EU, as to what are the conditions for agricultural products. So how do you see it?
I'm always 3 seconds late, so I apologize. Also, when they indicate me, I'm always coming afterwards.
I am putting questions in Polish for the audience.
And I have to say, Polish is very quick. Okay, I forgot.
Italian is quicker.
Italian is quicker.
Italian is quicker.
Italian sometimes is sweet. Polish seems you're angry, so I'm very careful sometimes. I'm like, okay, I didn't say anything bad. Joking aside. I was surprised by your words because it seems, and in a way, I'm very frustrated for that there is a anti-EU sentiment or feeling because of the policies that are being taken. I usually, if you follow the tech market or the tech industry, you call it a singularity or singular technology. It means that technology is developing at such a fast pace that policies or policymakers are not able to follow, or society is not able to follow. So the same thing I think is happening with food, because facts are happening so quick. COVID and the war in Ukraine, is the Murphy law. Everything that can go wrong goes wrong right now. So here it seems that things are going so quickly that policymakers are not following. And it seems that sometimes there is this fracture between what we do in our countries and what the European Union is doing. And I think the European Union has great long-term projects, but sometimes these long-term projects are clashing or conflicting with what's happening on the ground. This is in Poland, and I've just learned today, and in these days, and the same is in Italy, where now we have a very far-right conservative government that is pushing very much on the made in Italy and on the Italian sovereignty. Just to give you an example, artificial meat and the development of artificial meat was prohibited since 2 days ago. So we cannot buy or we cannot sell or we cannot produce artificial meat. And for me, it's a mistake, despite I'm a great meat lover, and I would probably never eat artificial meat if not just to taste it. But it's what is this? It's a reaction, I would say it's a populist reaction to the fear of being invaded by what's happening outside of Italy and Europe. Italy is a great food maker, and we are so proud of that, and the Mediterranean diet, as you know, but we are not a self-sufficient country. And when it comes to grain, we're not self-sufficient. We're a great producer of pasta and pizza, but we have to buy grain from outside. And when I say this on a TV talk show, I always get text messages or tweets by farmers that are very angry. But the reality is that the grain we produce is not of great quality either for making pasta. Pasta makers have to buy grain from Canada and the United States, where you have the use of chemical and fertilizers, and there is an environmental issue. But if you look at olive oil, it's the same thing. Italy produced high-quality olive oil, but not sufficient, so that we have to buy very cheap olive oil from Spain, from Tunisia, from Greece, from Turkey. So it means we are dependent on the rest of the world. And I think it works well that way, because at the end we are producer of high-quality food, but we are also transformers of high-quality food.
But can you visualize it that we do it only in the EU, among the EU countries?
And I think this is happening inside the EU. And it's understandable, because we fear that what's not working is because of the EU. And I think in a way there is partly a reason. As I said, the EU is sometimes far away from the problems of citizens, workers, consumers. Again, I'd like later to talk about the labeling. As you know, it's my obsession right now. And
you can mention that now.
No, I will talk about that later. But it seems Europe has long-term visions and sometimes ideology that are not being reflected then in the market. As you said, the Fit 55 and all the regulation that Europe is passing now, in a way, are not answering today's problem. They are answering general, long-term, as you said, problems, but people do not perceive it's today's problem. As we mentioned, I'm fascinated by the reform of the labeling system, so the front of pack labeling. And I got engaged into this because I was amazed how a small piece of paper on a food product hides or carries a great significance, a different way of looking at the world. So on one side, you want to educate and inform consumers because there is a serious problem, and the serious problem is obesity. Obesity is an issue in Europe. We're complaining that we're not self-sufficient with food, that there are problems with supply chains, but at the same time there is a serious problem, that is obesity, and what we call bad nutrition. In Europe, we have a high level of bad nutrition. We have a lot of food, but we have a very high level of bad nutrition. Now, I know everybody here is in a perfect shape, but we tend to eat poorly and bad. So the European Union said we need to try, European Union, FAO and the World Health Organization are trying to tackle this issue that is a global issue. And I read some papers by famous nutritionists and scientists where the life expectancy of a population that is keep growing, and that's a good news, might stop and start decreasing because of bad nutrition in Western countries or in the north of the world. So it's a serious issue. The problem is that the European Union is trying probably, and I'm here to say, no, don't go that way, there is another way, is try to solve this simply by saying, oh, I just put a little label on food products with some colors and some letters, some stars that says healthy food, unhealthy food. And this is a problem for diversity. When I landed yesterday in Poland, and this morning I got a beautiful breakfast, I realized once more the beauty of European diversity, food diversity.
What did you eat?
There was a lot of ham, different ham from Black Forest. So I ate that like crazy. Then of course there was Nutella. I ate Nutella as well, but it's not Polish.
Unhealthy.
That's not Polish, but it was from Poland in any way. So beside that, there is food diversity. And food diversity, I think, is a richness of Europe. The problem is that if we incorporate some of these labeling systems, they will negatively affect food diversity. Because basically most of our food in Poland, as in Italy, as in France, will be considered unhealthy food, according to what the European Union is trying to develop. It means that the fruit juice, the apple juice are going to be red or negative. So when on a shelf you have a good food or a bad food, according to the European Union, not according to us, not according to our DNA, not according to who we are, well, what would you choose? Probably the green food, the good food, Now, the question is, will Polish companies be able to produce good food in a way if they are sufficiently big with a big portfolio of products or a product line, they will reformulate their product to be healthy. But if there are small, medium enterprises that they don't have the resources, and in a way they are representing Polish traditional food, they don't have the need to change that, and they cannot simply change that. So their food will always be red. And the risk is that they fall out of the market. That's why we're telling the European Commission, yes, we need to tackle obesity. There is an issue. But the issue is not by saying that food is bad or that food is good, but it's through education of consumers.
Czyli my już doszliśmy teraz do rozmowy o tym, co zrobić z tymi naszymi problemami.
We have already started having a conversation on what to do with these problems, how to deal with these issues. Now I'm going to hand over to Jerzy Plewa. Can you take the floor? We have already started this exchange. And I'm not going to say no to many of the opinions that have been uttered. I agree with my four speakers for food sovereignty and self-reliance. It's good overall in Poland as well as in the EU, but let's not forget the following, and Pietro has mentioned this. Let's not forget we are dependent on import of protein from South America, 17 million tons every year. The same applies in the area of greens for some species. For this self-reliance to really happen, we should maximize protein plants in the EU, including in Poland, as we have deficits in this respect. We can cover as much as 80%, 88% of our pork demand in Poland. The rest needs to be exported, and we've got even prices lower in export than we get in import. Now, fertilizers, another problem. Without solving it, we won't tackle the issue of self-reliance in a satisfactory manner. We are indeed really dependent. 30% of fertilizers have been imported from the East in the EU, historically speaking. Now, to pick up on what my colleague said, it is not true that these regulations are as rigid. What kind of strategy would it be if it would have to be amended every year? Well, we need to have some stability, 20% of organic production. Well, for Poland, estimations are there's going to be as much as 7% of all the food production in the organic area, and we used to have 5. I've recently had meetings with apple producers. They've said they are struggling, and the only thing that sells is organic apples. Fertilizers are not applied in organic farming. There are organic farmers who say now they're experiencing their heydays as they can't really meet the demand for beef. And they were not hit at all by high prices in fertilizers, as they don't use them whatsoever. If there is anything new, let's block it. That's what we usually say in Poland. That's something that we inherited from the central planning system we used to live under for many years. And we can't really apply an objective perspective. There are already European countries where this level of organic production has already exceeded 20%. Czechs are, for instance, very advanced in this respect. And let me tell you one more thing. Indeed, some societies in European member states say Brussels means all bad. And anything we say at the country level is good. Let's stop this kind of approach. We've got some goals. They are not questioned, even here in Poland. There are various goals. And these goals are to be implemented locally in various countries. And this shouldn't be about saying that this is the European Commission that decides everything. And there's one more trouble in Poland. We criticize, and at the same time, we miss our opportunities as we don't take advantage of funds which are there for the green transition. There is resilience and recovery plan for digital affairs, for other areas, and we don't get these funds, and this will hugely impact our competitive position. Symptoms are already there. I did not want to get political. Recovery plan is not yet there in Poland. In Italy, it has already started. Just to relate to it, I'm not going to have this exchange on the strategic matter, but there is one thing valid in economy and has been there for years, for hundreds of years, namely, there needs to be balance. Costs mustn't be higher than the price you get for your product. That's the rule of the thumb. Because if it so happens, then we will have serious problems, i.e. we will stop producing. Of course, the system can be like they give us funds, so we'll keep producing. But the question is, well, will it end? To what extent will we make our economy dependent from the funds from the EU? Money needs to get from somewhere. Somebody needs to pay taxes. So we are as if we were hamsters in this treadmill. This has to stop. The economic policy of the European Union must be designed otherwise. We are not a single island. We are interconnected. We are not self-reliant for many things. Therefore, we need to have money at hand to be able to buy products at the outside of the European Union. We need to get resources. Companies need to get resources. They need to earn them. On the one hand. On the other hand, there are surpluses. We won't store everything within the European Union, as the case goes with apples. And we know the story already in 2014 when there was this ban on apples. We thought we could use the whole of our production ourselves. But then LOT, i.e. our Polish airlines, were giving away apples on board. Great, but this has no significance whatsoever and did not rescue the situation. We need to export outside the EU, and in order to be able to do so, we need to stay competitive. And if we want to be competitive, we need to tackle costs here at home and all the cost-related factors in the agricultural business. We need to review everything very carefully before any regulation enters into force. Everything has to be made subject to thorough analysis. And last but not least, we need to act at home at the EU state level. Some countries have already exceeded the level of 20% for organic farming. Other countries have deposit systems for plastic bottles, but we don't have the same situation here at home in Poland. So if there are penalties to be paid, we will pay huge money. I will open the floor for questions in a second, but a question to Pietro.
What about the competitiveness of Italian producers? There are many small companies in Italy. We all love Italian cuisine, but we like those artisanal products produced by smaller companies or medium-sized companies. And that's why this Italian agri-food sector is so interesting. It's so varied. We also have some regional products in Poland. So how do you do it in Italy? How do you protect yourself against competitiveness loss?
I think we are not really defending ourselves from what happens, and we can have this discussion in Rome today, and probably we would have the same type of discussion because the problems are the same. But I think that what I said earlier, it's very important. It refers very much to Italy, but I think it can refer to Poland as well. Before entering, the country, I was doing some readings about your agriculture sector, your food sector, and it's certainly smaller than Italy in terms of variety, but I think it reflects the core of Europe, and is what I said earlier. It's the diversity. Italy has a great food diversity, and we have decided, or Italian companies that are mainly small, medium enterprises, have decided to invest on quality and on the brand, and therefore, going to what you said earlier, that is certainly to sell at home, but is also to export, so to go abroad. And certainly cost and the price are relevant, but if you're able to invest on quality and on the brand of that quality, then people are willing, of course, to spend and to invest. But then the European policies have to support this. If we want to be sustainable or nature positive, as the European Union correctly wants, then I think we need to work at the global level to make sure that all our policies, I think about the zero deforestation policy, that to me is a great breakthrough. That means that at least 7 commodities now entering Europe have to prove that they are zero deforestation, so they have deforested nothing. This is causing a lot of challenges because some countries are saying, I cannot comply with this regulation, and therefore I will not bring my products to Europe. Obviously, this is a bluff and probably a negotiation attempt, but it's giving us a sign. If we implement these sustainability policies on our own, we risk to pay the price, but then the rest of the world is not coming along. I think the European Union should also invite other countries like the United States, and particularly India and China, to try to follow these policies. Otherwise, there will be a distortion of the market. And I go back to what I said earlier with the front of pack is the same thing. If we want to produce so healthy food, we should not do it at the cost of the small, medium enterprises that are working every day in Europe, because the risk is that in order to follow what I think is a nonsense, because it's not based on scientific facts, of the good food, bad food, the risk is that thousands of European entrepreneurs, they will force either to change their foods, and I don't think they can do it, or to be left out of the market. And if they left out of the market, we will have labor, and probably people will be thinner, not because of a diet, but because they cannot eat. This is a serious issue. And again, I think we need, as civil society, as think tanks, as media, as everybody, try to bring the European Commission and the European Parliament, and particularly to the next Commission I'm referring, into working into a balance between sustainability, between healthy food, the fight against obesity, with the economic needs. And this is something that, unfortunately, in the past years has, in a way, fallen apart. Again, the front of pack labeling is a great reform, is needed, but again, I think that today technology is overcoming all of this. Europe is being obsessed with these colors, like what I call the pop art fetish, the red and the green, and I think it's a nonsense because it's dead. It's a dead system because technology today has overcome all of this. Israel has provided us and the United States with great studies on the personalized diets, or the precision diet as it is, and the use of the devices we have around us are today basically giving us the chance to know in real time. If I see your watch right now, can tell you, look, you need some proteins right now, and it can directly be connected. It can be connected to your device and with the next store, and the next store right now can deliver something to you. And this is a great opportunity. Some people say, oh, this is science fiction. It's not science fiction, it's the future, but the future of tomorrow, not of 10 years from now. And Europe has this opportunity to say, we need to look into artificial intelligence linked to food and agriculture, to look in the development of Internet of Things devices, to look into personalized diets, to give European citizens the chance to freely choose and the chance to personalize our own diet. We still have a European Commission that tends to say, this is what you should eat. Sorry, you don't tell me what to eat. I want to eat whatever I want based on who I am. And I think it's a big challenge, because if we say Europe tells you what to eat and it's not you to decide, we have the discrimination of freedom of choice, we have a discrimination of diversity. So I'm telling the European Commission, don't waste time over this old system. Look into the future, because if Europe is not doing it, China will do it, US will do it, rich countries in the Middle East will do it, and tomorrow our kids will go around with their devices and they get their food delivered at home, but the data and the control of the algorithms will not be in our hands, but will be in the hands of Chinese government or the US government.
To jest kwestia, jak rozumiem, do
I know you don't
dyskusji.
agree, on that.
Ja chciałam
This is a debatable issue. It's quite controversial. And now I would like to give the floor to Director Plewa. Yes, I would like to comment on color coding in labels. This is a very important issue. And the Italians... okay, let me explain the bigger picture. We have been discussing it for a few years. Some countries adopted color coding for nutritional score. So it's just like for fridges and the energy score, exactly. So there are 4 parameters that are taken into account. Sugars, salt, energy value, and fatty acids. And a few other ingredients. And this is a very simplified system, a very simple algorithm, and colors ranging from green to red. It's like a traffic light system. So you have dark green, green. So green is good and red is bad. Of course, everybody understands it. Green is good and acceptable, and red means run away from the shelf. It's a very unfair system. And the main opponent of this system is Italy. And as far as I remember, there were 6 or 7 other countries opposing the system. 6 or 7 other countries have introduced the system, and some member states approved of the system as their national system. It's called Nutri-Score. This is a French system, a private solution actually. So we have a great challenge. The French love to regulate and they love administration, that's right. We do not have enough time to discuss the system, but the system prefers highly processed foods that can be modified easily. In Poland, there are many traditional products, many regional products. We have a list of traditional products, and they lose against highly processed food. Let me give you an example. Juice. Juice cannot be modified. This is just pressed fruit with no additives. It just includes its natural sugar coming from fruit, and that's all. And the kind of juice gets either orange or red marking from C to E. And a drink, an artificial drink, like cola, Coke, if you take sugar out and use sweeteners, then this kind of product will be labeled green. And this is something that you can find on the shelf in green. And when is the decision-making moment? When you are in front of the shelf. That's when consumers take the choices. I do not represent the European Commission, because I don't work for them anymore. But some of those things are just not true. It's not true that the European Commission makes anybody eat something. I've never heard of it. But the European Commission says that we need to reduce food waste. And the goal is to reduce it by 50%. In Poland, 5 million tons of food is wasted. Isn't it right? It is right. I can see my colleague from Food Fact here. So you must know quite a lot about Nutri-Score. So it's not about the European Commission, first of all. Nutri-Score is a private system. But there has been an attempt to regulate on the European level. And Nutri-Score is supported by 7 countries. Italy is against. Italy has its own labeling system. Poland doesn't take a stance, which is quite characteristic as well. And
Dlatego, że
I'm 100% right. So Italy has its battery system, which also has its disadvantages. But when it comes to labeling, I believe that there is a need for information. But big processing companies are against. For example, you buy wine. You have no idea how much sugar it contains. In Ireland, there is a great debate on the percentage of sugar in alcohol, that it should be announced, it should be reported. But the consumers are not all educated enough to take their decisions on the basis of the list of ingredients. But the Commission is just the government of the European Union. It's a kind of management board. All they can do is propose a bill. But these are member states who actually take decisions. There is a co-decision procedure. So the process is initiated by the Commission, but member states decide. So I understand that there are many ideas, some of them are controversial. So far, this labeling is voluntary. Unless you don't state something untrue on the label, labeling is voluntary, so it's up to us. There are many labeling systems. And I wanted to say something, because we, as the Polish Federation, introduced the RWS system. This is the system with a percentage of calorie consumption. And in the beginning, there was a lot of talk. Everybody thought that it was useless, and now everybody has it. You need to take 2 things into consideration. On the one hand, we have a great variety of foodstuffs. And if I drink wine, I don't think about the content of sugar. That's not why I drink alcohol. The same goes for vodka, for other spirits. Nobody really cares. But there are products that we use on everyday basis. And there, the content in sugar plays a great role. Because you might have a lot of provisions that will not change anything, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really change the intake of a given product. It doesn't change the amount of something that we eat. So talking about food profiles in Europe, we have been talking about it for a long time, but nobody knows how to do it well. but it's not really about the content composition of a given product. It's rather about the amount of the product that we eat and how much of it is used to produce other foodstuffs, other products. For example, fat. We know what fat is and what it is used for. So there has been a lot of debate. The debate has been heated. It was announced that in 2020, European Union was to adopt one unified labeling system. And it's not that Poland didn't express its opinion. It did. And the Polish government said, in simple words, no matter what the European Union comes up with, it has to be analyzed. It has to be researched. It has to be consulted. And then it must be evidence-based. And what this means is in-depth research. The system to be adopted can't be discriminatory. It has to be used as a source of information only. And then there are some products that have traditional recipes, and those formulations will not change. And they can't be changed because they would lose their, let's say, traditional product labeling. So there is a very big line of products that cannot be additionally labeled, because labeling cannot actually express what the product really is, what it contains. So we are in a situation in which there are a few voluntary labeling systems. The RWS system is the most common in Poland. There are others like batteries, like keyholes, but we have the Polish labeling. Yes, but this is something totally different. This is not about the nutritional score. So where are we now? There's a lot of uncertainty. We know that some works are being continued when it comes to the front of product labeling, but we don't know where we are headed.
It is with great interest that I'm following this discussion, as it is related to what we eat at the end of the day. So there is this challenge related to food security in the first place, i.e., are we safe as Europeans in terms of do we have sufficient stuff to eat? So we won't be hungry. That's thing number one. Thing number two, or question number two, can we be independent from the outside world? Or can we be self-reliant in the EU? For some products we can, for others not. And this provokes further questions related to supply chains. And there is always this war context to be taken into consideration. 3, health. Are we safe enough as consumers of foodstuffs? And around this thing, there are heated debates going on, as there is this gap between what regulators think and what consumers think. And last but not least, the cap. An aside, common agricultural policy is common, but there are some competences to be managed by the member states. So it is different to common trade policy. So whereby these competencies are only on the part of the European Commission. We've got some deviations for the trade policy, as there might be a ban of a single member states. Of course, but CAP is common and it has a very long history, has been there from the very beginnings, from the very origins of the EU. And we've got our own Commissioner for Agriculture in the European Commission in that legislature 2019-2024. This is our area of competence in the European Commission, our Polish area of competence in the European Commission. Now, let's relate to the following question. What are the best steps we can take in order for our agricultural standing to be as good as possible, for our producers, food producers, to stay afloat, to gain as much as they can? What can we do? So that's my question to you. Are there questions from the room? So just introduce yourselves first. Hello, Polityka Weekly. A question to Mr. Plewa in the first place, but this is also a question to all of you, gentlemen. Why does the EU not change its policies regarding technological progress in agriculture? We said goodbye to biotechnology 20 years ago. What are the odds something changes in this area? That is, plant producers can use newest accomplishments of biotechnology in the area of genomes management, for instance. Mr. Plewa mentioned organic farming. Well, it is in line with the recent research. Organic farming is organic just by its name. And my question is as follows. Why is it the case that the EU focuses so much on organic farming that would, mean not progress, but the reversal of it, and we would find ourselves in a situation from 100 years ago? So what do specialists say to it? So let's have one more question, and the third one. Adam Stańczyk, Marshal Office of the Kievan Pomeranian Voivodeship. Food security matters a lot to us. Our region is very important for food production in Poland. You must know it, but just for your knowledge, every third tomato, every second onion come from our region. And therefore, droughts are so dangerous for us. 9 or 10 years that we've been experiencing agricultural droughts and food instability, agricultural instability. And therefore, we nurture interest in these matters very much indeed. But Europe's perspective, my question to all of you. A question about the mindset of you citizens. Because EU means, as people say, advantage of quality over business. And he also mentioned the production of fertilizers. Fertilizers are, in the area of its production, is based on natural gas. 3 or 4 countries of origin of natural gas are considered non-democracies. Therefore, a question arises, if we really want to eat food used with fertilizers, whose production support these non-democratic states, then bear in mind political risk, the risk of political blackmail. And now, speaking values and fertilizers at the same time, we know EU member states are intensive economies fertilizers-wise. In other countries, less advanced, it looks different, as fertilizers go to water, to soil, produce contamination. But at the same time, we can have cheap food that gets to Europe from these countries. So this gets back to our European values. I don't really know if gentlemen can remind and remember all the things that you asked about. So let's stay with values. So let's have Mr. Plewa speak as the first one. Politica Daily's question. When will the EU start supporting technological progress in agriculture? Well, EC policy has to be there to reflect the opinions of the EU citizens. Biotechnology has been put on hold in terms of its implementation in the EU, is something down to protests, social protests. It all started with GMO, and so we have genetically modified products, and we've got CAP. For genetically modified products, if they are to be authorized, and there is a special body which is a certification body for genetically modified products, if also authorization is given away, such products can be traded within the EU. A lot of soy and other protein plants are imported from Latin America, where production is mass and based on genetically modified products. And the same applies to Poland. Poland has been pretty opposing of such attitudes. There are some permitted genetically modified grains. Where are they grown? In Spain or in Romania. And this means competitive advantages for these countries. However, Poland was strongly opposing of such solutions. So, EU does not mean only Poland. EU has been historically focused on technological progress, but it is not restricted to biotechnology. Genes, you mentioned, there was a ruling of the ECJ that blocked the implementation given social protests, and therefore ECJ played a role in this respect as well, but the chances are it gets unblocked. So this is also a side kind of manipulation, but smaller than genetically modified products. Maybe we'll be able to grow plants that would be more resilient to droughts or low temperatures. But there is a whole series of action which is taken over by the EC, for example, in the area of precision agriculture. For example, how much fertilizer you give away, if you can measure it precisely, then it means savings. Every single country could do that. EC was in favor of it, shown. It can be our signature solution. Poland has not taken advantage of this scenario, so we need to look first at what is going on in Poland and what our politicians decide on and what is decided on at the EU level. We spoke at length about sugar. €300, that's what we add to every single hectare. For beets, sugar beets, there is sugar tax, and this landscape is very diverse. There is no cohesion. There is no cohesion also in terms of whether we play in line with what the EC has encouraged us to do. We are lagging behind in other areas too. The lack of funds from the recovery plan is also making us more prone to losses. And now, speaking of food security, and values, as values were emphasized by in one question. That is, what about buying from non-democratic countries? This has been well incorporated in the European Green Deal to make ourselves independent from fossil fuels on the one hand. And I believe that those who will advance the European Green Deal will be better off. Strategies are political commitments, but their implementation is also down to goodwill on the part of each and every member state. The EC can play a motivating role, but will not do the actual task on behalf of the European member states. Well, let me observe one thing. During the French presidency, one new term was coined, that is food sovereignty. Food sovereignty is all about our approach in the years to come. There will be much discussion around globalization, what's our take on it, and there's no clarity what we should do in this respect. But again, let me stress the following. All the endeavors coming from the European Green Deal can help us out, mitigating many risks that you brought to the table. This is not a short-term rescue plan, but I believe overall we are pursuing the right path. Climate neutrality has also been something postulated by China. Plans are similar also in the United States for the year 2050. Maybe they approach this area otherwise, not by means of regulations, but rather incentives for business. For coal, in the United States, people get paid if coal is recovered in plant production. So we are already in our infancy with all these matters. Director, President, can you also give your reply to question number 2 or question number 1? The question was on countries from which we import, and they are not democratic states. There's been a shift in geopolitics recently. The problem you mentioned is not new at all. Bioethanol import, just look at it. First, we had planned for something, then it turned out we'd need to import this raw material. And what's the country of origin of bioethanol? Brazil. Cutting of trees. Biodiesel is imported from Asia, where they deforest en masse. It's not true. They're doing it for food production. Not at all. This is something that they do to produce biodiesel 7 times more intensely than for food production. And these are the ramifications that we need to be speaking about. This is what happens if we are too short-sighted. The share of biocomponents was once supposed to be large. And if that had been the case, it would have meant all the fields would be rape fields in Europe solely for the production of bioethanol. This has partially come to being. Well, so on the one hand, we want to be self-reliant, be independent from countries which are different value-wise. But at the same time, I agree 100% with Director Plewa. We are indeed lagging behind here. Some may ask, why is that? We don't have as many biogas plants in Poland as they do in Germany, for instance. Barely any farm has their own biogas plant. Why can't we have it? Why it has been blocked systemically? Why wind energy has been blocked in Poland? So now we've entered politics. We have, but it is very important in itself. There are some regulations which bear consequences as they decide on our energy mix. And our energy mix may speak to our favor or may speak to our disfavor, and the latter is the case. look at how we differ with Americans in terms of attitudes, in terms of the overall approach. Americans say if business wants to follow suit, they can. Incentives will follow. We operate with penalties, so that's a fundamental gap in how we approach all this situation and our economic growth. I believe they do it better. They perform better in economic terms, in social terms, in other terms. So until the overall mindset hasn't changed in terms of Green Deal implementation, how to partner with business, how to partner with farmers, for all this to be a concerted effort, I've read we will have to swallow all these these knock-on effects that we have. There will be fertilizers, there will be issues with bioethanol, there will be other issues, and we'll have to tackle all these issues. I need to clarify something. This is not that EU has been advocating for the import of palm oil that would have been produced unsustainably. This is not true. This is not true. I did not say the EU encourages. It was the EU that introduced regulations that has put on hold the import of palm oil. And the same holds true for bioethanol regulations, which determine how much a proportion of bioethanol there may be. And look what the protesting farmers demand. They want their rapeseed can be produced, can be changed for bioethanol. So this is not some imperative on the part of European Union. What European Union has been proposing for the European Green Deal has been the border adjusting mechanism. This mechanism makes it possible to have some fees when certain imports do not meet sustainability standards, i.e. their carbon footprint is far greater compared to what is allowed in the EU. These are all complicated matters. We are all members at WTO. These are comprehensive processes which are now stuck but still going on. There are some drafts for some products, many of them not implemented yet, but I believe these paths will be pursued in the future as well.
So let me concentrate on the fertilizers and plant protection products in the context of what has been discussed. First of all, when it comes to both categories and especially pesticides, the European Union has eliminated, has banned many of those chemicals, especially exported from the third countries. So we have measures taken on the highest level. But when you ask a particular agricultures, they hold a grudge. They don't like the fact that a given substance that was effective, though harmful, that was banned. Coming back to my apple juice from Ukraine example, some of the chemicals and pesticides are allowed there. The same goes for grain production, but you cannot import a product with the concentration of residual amounts of substances are too high. But the controls are patchy, and what goes around comes around. When it comes to pesticides, the European Union says that in the framework of environmental programs, the use of pesticides has to be cut by 50%. And there is one provision for everybody. And we have, nevertheless, different starting points. Because in Poland, we use less than 2 kilos. And let's take the Netherlands or Belgium, and they consume 8 kilograms. This is not true. I'm sorry, but I just need to get something straight. Nothing has been decided yet. There is no agreement on the regulation that you are discussing. There is talk. Yes, of course, there is some talk because the discussions are ongoing. I'm in touch with producers, and they say that if we use the same production techniques, the use of pesticides and fertilizers is very similar. It doesn't really matter where it is something is produced. But if you calculate the consumption of chemicals in Poland per hectare, per all available agricultural surface, then you get those low numbers. If Poland wants to reform something, Poland has to be able to form a coalition with other countries and cooperate with the European Commission. And we all know the story of how Poland is effective at cooperating with the European Commission. So I work for an organization that analyzes all projects of regulations and so on. And we start with an absurd idea, which is either not effective or it will be harmful. And then we will have to put 3 years of work, 3 years of lobbying, trying to explain the situation and trying to convince people that those ideas are not good. Then in the end, we find a compromise. But couldn't we start from a better proposition up front, from a better proposal? It would be much easier. Let me say one more thing. When it comes to the reduction of pesticides use, we use a lot of pesticides. So if we cut by 50%, Poland would have to reduce much more than others. But when it comes to fertilizers, the situation is quite different. Poland has low levels of fertilizers, and others will have to cut more. But this is something that Poland doesn't see. But all in all, Poland will use even less fertilizers than others. We thought that 2 hours for food and agriculture in Europe is a lot of time, but we have just started the conversation, I can see. Okay, let us give the floor to our guest from Italy, to Pietro. Pietro, can you speak back to those questions? Can you share your perspective? Unfortunately, we don't have time for other questions.
Because we started from the labeling system and the front to pack, and now we ended in the fertilizer. So I don't know where. Yeah, no, I know. And it's very interesting. I left Italy where the debate was very much on the front to pack, and now I see here it's very much on fertilizer. I just want to clarify a few things because, you know, my grandmom was used to say all the time, an apple a day takes the doctor away. And I see that now the fruit juice or the apple juice is considered to be unhealthy, according to the AGRI, that is one of the proposals that the European Commission is validating. And here, I need, since we are at the end, to open maybe a challenge for the next debate. It should be on the mechanism on how the European Union works, because you're correct, the European Commission is not is not making the laws, but is proposing. And it's, this system has been around for many years, for decades. And I think that today, with so many regulation and directives, it's probably better if the parliament has a better role, like in any other country, where it's the parliament that is has also the legislative power to present rules. Otherwise, there are transparent issues also with the mechanism of how the European Commission works. And I think this is at the very, I know it's not an exciting topic, but is at the origin and the roots of all the discussion that we are having, because it's always someone at the Commission that is being consulted by someone else, usually NGOs, and these NGOs are the one receiving money from the European Commission, so it's a cycle that they consult, and they basically tell the European Commission what to do. The European Commission tells to the Parliament, then the Parliament has a very limited role, then there is a Council of Europe, and we saw that with the electric cars, then there is a fight at the Council of Europe.
Just to clarify, Komisja Europejska w systemie unijnym ma wyłączność, ma inicjatywę.
So the Commission has the initiative. So the legislative initiative has to be tabled by the European Commission, but then it has to be consulted with the European Parliament.
Parliament that is the one really representing all of us, because we vote, so they are our representatives. But this is the topic for another, certainly for another discussion. But it's important because sometimes the European Commission is taking positions that are too little science-based and too much ideological, and this is an issue, and they are very much long-term, and we need to support long-term policies, but they don't recognize, they don't acknowledge the problem that people are facing right now. I cannot go into the specific, honestly, of what you said about the fertilizer, because I'm not an expert. I understand that moving to organic farming means preserving biodiversity and preserving the quality of soil, and I agree with that. The point is always how fast we're going to do this process and how fast farmers and the food industry can react to this new legislation. This is the main challenge. It's like with electric cars. We all love electric cars, but the question is, by 2035, we will be ready. Honestly, I don't think we will be ready, at least if I look at Italy. But you said something interesting, that is the investing in technology is something that we need to do, and we shouldn't be afraid. And if we look at Israel that you mentioned earlier, with precision or smart agriculture, this is going to be the future, because it's the one that through technology, artificial intelligence, will allow us to better use the resources and at the same time to increase our productivity. What we are missing now is sustainability / productivity. This equation is not here. Often the Parliament and the Commission at the European level are thinking about sustainability and they don't think about productivity, and productivity at the end is the price. So we need to increment our productivity by using technology. The same, very quick, because I understand we are in a hurry and I see you are but the question is, shall we work with non-democratic country? Well, at the end, I would say theoretically no, of course, but practically we need resources at the end. So the point is how geopolitically we can establish strong relationship with countries so that it does not happen what has happened with Russia, or it does not happen, and I'm speaking because it's closer to us, what has happened with Libya. You know, we've been provided with a lot of gas and oil from Libya. But at the end, you know, the U.S. wanted to go in and take away the dictator. And honestly, Italy was having a great relationship with the dictator, economically speaking. And I'm very pragmatic on this. And then England and France, that were jealous, went into Libya. Now Libya is a complete mess, where even Turkey and Russia are playing their own little game. So I think we need to be careful. But again, it goes back to the ideology and the mechanism at the European level, because when we talk about migration and when we talk about energy policy, Europe is still 27 different countries that have 27 different needs. And that's probably the beauty of Europe. So when I have this sort of discussion, I'm always happy, because at the end I say, okay, we are 27 different people, and probably even, you know, in this room there are different opinions. So as a European Union, we have to fight with that. You said correctly, the US have a different approach. and is a more empowered consumer approach. When we talk about the Nutri-Score, or against the Nutri-Score, we have this approach that is Europe should empower consumers, not tell consumers what to do. The US are more in empowering producers, giving producers what they need to do things. Europe, traditionally, I mean, we are not Adam Smith country, we are a Hegelian country. So usually it's governments that tend to tell people what to do. And it will probably take a long time before we overcome this. And it will take a lot of time before we fix the European mechanism. But in a way, they have been working well, because if we are prosperous, it's because this mechanism at the end proved to work. Sometimes they don't, and I think the effort is to make them work, but I think this is a challenge for you with the next debate to be taken.
Jedno słowo tylko, przepraszam się, wetnę, bo Stany Zjednoczone...
United States, let me put in a word here, they have a different approach, that they have a great negative balance when it comes to food trade with Europe. This means that they import great quality food from Europe. And I'm very happy that the Americans import food from Poland as well. And if they want to import quality food, this means they can afford it. And money doesn't come from a bank machine, at least in the United States. So, food and agriculture in Europe, this has been our topic. Nevertheless, we have been discussing war, migration, competitiveness, values, entrepreneurship. This all shows that this sector is fascinating and worth talking about, because this is the agri-food sector is really at the heart of European debate. The war of Russia on Ukraine only accentuates the importance of food, agriculture, and water. Thank you very much. I would like to thank our guests, Mr. Paganini, Mr. Gantner, Mr. Pawlak, and Mr. Plewa, and it was Monika Bonikowska. Thank you very much, your moderator.